All right, everybody, welcome back to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. And welcome back to the show. Ben is joining me, and Ian will be shortly as soon as his youngest decides to finally go to sleep. She is quite the little pistol tonight, so he'll be jumping in here shortly. But last week we dove into all of the different free agents, unrestricted, restricted, exclusive rights guys that the Steelers will be dealing with and quite frankly are currently dealing with as we get closer to free agency. And then tonight, what we wanted to do was kind of dive into a little bit of the salary cap stuff. And I part of the reason I love having both Ben and Ian around here is because they know this stuff way better than I do. And so we'll look into that a little bit, talk about where it's supposed to be, where it could be, but more importantly, you know, where the Steelers are going to be and look at some of these guys with 1 year remaining on their deals, because I think for all the heartache that many people are going to go through when JuJu does finally move on and sign with somebody else, because that's going to happen. I think there's going to be a few names of guys with 1 year left that might really tug at the heartstrings of some fans as well. But so we'll get into that a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about the Steelers' new assistant offensive line coach, who actually has more experience than the offensive line coach. But we'll get into that. And I received last week a very interesting email from a Ravens fan. And there's a backstory there, and there's a buildup, and there's some stuff coming down the road on this. But let's just say it should be entertaining, to say the least. Ben, kudos to you, and how are you this fine evening?
Oh, I'm good. I'm fine, man. Yourself?
Yeah. I'm good. I'm my wife got me this this box full of whiskey and bourbon shots. It's like 8 or 10 different bottles, and you just kind of try each one. And I'm currently working on a Alabama style whiskey, Clyde Mays, is what it's called. So it's okay. It's not anything I'm going to run out and buy, but it'll do the job this evening. And other than that, just freezing my ass off because it's about 8 degrees right now, and
Good times.
Yeah, expected to get even colder this weekend. So, terrific. So let's just, in fact, let's talk a little bit about the offensive line coach first. This is a guy that named Chris Morgan who comes over. He was with the Atlanta Falcons. He's got what we would refer to as the zone blocking history and experience there, outside zone. And he's got, as I said in the open, he's got more experience than Adrian Clem, the new offensive line coach, has. And that's not terribly unusual to have something like that. But I think the other thing, too, is this guy has experience as a run game coordinator as well. What is, Ben, and I'll throw it to you on this, what is the importance of a guy who is known as a run game coordinator in this role here?
As an assistant offensive line coach, I don't know how much significance it's going to have. I don't imagine a lot. I don't know. I mean, he doesn't. I guess the theory is that Clem knows the personnel better, knows what their strengths and weaknesses are. But they're both Clem and Morgan are both going into a new scheme under a new coordinator. So I don't really know how that's going to work out. Typically, a run game coordinator will take a look at the opposing team on film, watch them, look for weaknesses in their game, compare that to what his guys do well, and then make suggestions to the OC saying, I think we should do this, this, and this because my guys do it well and they're susceptible to it.
Right.
And it kind of goes from there. But I don't know. I mean, that, for example, that's what Munchak did.
Right.
That's exactly what Munchak did. And that's why the run game was very successful. under Mike Munchak when he was still in Pittsburgh. And I don't know that Sean Surratt had that kind of latitude, and the run game didn't click under Surratt.
Do you? I mean, are we to believe that with Matt Canada that we're just automatically going to some form of outside zone blocking scheme here? Is that just something that we should bank on, or is there something more to it than that?
Inside, outside, probably, yeah. I mean, the Steelers have fairly mobile offensive linemen, with the exception of Zach Banner, who has just always been a plotter.
Right.
You've got some guys that are pretty athletic, especially as 300-pound guys go. So, depending. I mean, I don't know who's going to play center next year yet. Neither do you. If Pouncey retires, that changes things a bit. It could work, though, is the thing. And I'm sure they'll still do some gap blocking in certain instances, short yardage, for example. But going to a zone blocking scheme allows the offense to take advantage of the defense when they're a little bit off kilter because there's been a lot of motion pre-snap, and they're still adjusting to what's going to happen. And throwing in those surprises with the blocks in a ZBS with a trap game, still have some pulls, but with a trap game,
right?
Some counters, some pulls, some traps, and it can work out well. It can lend itself to some success. A guy like Anthony McFarland is very well suited to that kind of an offense. For example, he's just a guy that you want to get him a little seam, get him to the second level, and see what he can do. And that's really what they needed to do with him last year. Instead, they were trying to run between the tackles, and he had a couple of glimpses where you thought that maybe he might do something, but he wasn't that successful because he's not a big bruising back type guy.
Right. Yeah, and so it's fair to say that's probably what we're looking at come the new season. So it does definitely make sense with Morgan now being on board here with Clem. I'd like to welcome Ian in to the show. Ian, we've just started and just talking a little bit about the new assistant offensive line coach, Chris Morgan, and just a little bit about that stuff. But
yeah, he's been around for a while.
Yeah, longer than Clem, and he's got some interesting experience both as offensive line coach and run game coordinator and stuff. So I like it. I'm curious. None of us will know this, but you got to wonder what he and Mike Tomlin talked about. Is he there to oversee what Adrian Clem does? Is he there just to assist, be a shoulder to cry on in the rough times? I don't know. But I'm curious to see how it all develops because clearly they've needed some help in this particular area for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's dive into the salary cap stuff. And Ian, since you're joining us, I'll throw it to you first. We've been told for months that the floor was going to be $175 million. There is some talk that the NFL could get TV contracts done, which could help raise that a little bit. I mean, let's say that it even raises it to 182, something like that. I mean, should fans expect, oh, geez, that means we can sign JuJu and Bud Dupree? I mean, what really is the expectation here?
Bud, no. JuJu, I'll say is a maybe, depending on what else they do.
No.
Probably not. But here's what I'll say.
I have him at $21 million over if the cap comes in at 180, and that's with the carryover from this year. I don't see either one of those guys coming back, and I don't want to sell the fans false hope of that possibility.
Well, Ian does. Ian's going to sell some false hope, so give it a shot, Ian.
Okay. My false hope is that in the first year of a contract, you can get it for a significantly lower cap hit.
Okay.
So if you gave JuJu basically the same contract that Jarvis Landry got, which at $15.1 million a year would probably be a fairly steep discount for JuJu. We talked last week how JuJu's probably more in the market of your 16 to 17 million, somewhere in the range of your Mike Evans, Odell Beckham type deal numbers. Okay. We say he's above Adam Thielen last week, which was, Thielen and Brandon Cooks are both sitting at 16.2. Robert Woods with the Rams is at 16.25. So, he's definitely better than those guys. So he's probably sitting in the 17 million a year range. But if you give him Jarvis Landry's contract, which would be a steep hometown discount if you took it, then you could get him for like $3.5 to $4 million against the cap for the first year of the deal. That number goes up significantly in future years. Right. But just looking at 2021, and like I said, a lot of things have to fall in place there. JuJu has to be willing to take, much less than his market value. But, depending on length and total term, you can get those things done. Because if you look at, Jarvis Landry's total contract was $75 million versus Cooper Kupp, who was slightly above him, signed a deal for fewer years, and his total contract was like $47 million. So yeah, if you offer him the Landry deal at, $75 million total value, the Steelers do have a pretty good history of, paying guys at least a majority of their contract value. They're not going to sign a guy 1 year and then go out and just cut him the next year. That's not how they operate. So there is some security in that, and knowing that, you will actually get a lot more, but it's going to come down to guaranteed money. The Steelers have notoriously only guaranteed the signing bonus in their contracts, and a lot of other players across the board, not just wide receivers, have been getting a lot more guaranteed money in their contracts than just the signing bonus. So the Steelers may be behind the eight ball a little bit if they stick with that policy too, because the guaranteed money is really what it's all about.
So Ben, you're definitely in the corner of, even if it came up to that, JuJu, just the likelihood is slim and none, right?
Yes. And I'll just summarize. The Steelers are in cap hell. They're 21 million over by my calculations. If the cap comes in at 180 million, if it comes in at 185, they're 16 million over. They have 19 of their own free agents. 19. They have depth at the wide receiver position, and they have needs elsewhere. Bottom line, I doubt they even make an attempt to sign him.
So would it be insulting for them to just say, hey, JuJu, what do you think about this number? And it's way under what he's worth. I mean, do they even try that, or do they just say,
no, they're going to say, hey, let us know. Let us know what you get out there on the market. And, if we can match it, we'll try. And he's going to find something they can't match, and that's going to be the end of it. It's going to be very, very brief.
This week, Ben Roethlisberger was supposed to have sat down with the powers that be, and to this point, we do not have any confirmation that he did that. And, of course, in the current situation, that could very well have been just a Zoom meeting, and making it much more difficult to know when and if they talked, because obviously you don't see Ben at the facility. So he's the first guy with a year left on his contract, and I think many people know the math and the situation here, Ian, but Mark Cabali did a great job of breaking down, the 4 or 5 different ways this could go. I mean, what are you looking at? He's going to be 39 years old, and we know the history. What are we looking at here with Big Ben?
So the Steelers essentially have 4 options with all of their guys who have only 1 year left on their deal. Last week we talked about the guys who are going to be free agents. This week I assume we'll talk some more about the guys with 1 year left. So with only 1 year left, you can't take cap money and push it out into future years unless you actually sign the guy to an extension. With a guy like Ben, what they can do is essentially put, I'll say, quote unquote, dummy years on the back end of the contract, kind of like they did for Heath Miller and Troy Polamalu, which is basically you sign him to a 3 or 4 year extension with the expectation that he's only going to play this year and then is going to retire. So none of that money in future years is guaranteed. So the only money that then counts against the cap when he retires is actually the remainder of the signing bonus that you paid out in year one. So
Gotcha.
With Ben going into this year, he has a $4 million base salary and a $15 million signing bonus that's due in mid-March. So really they have to make a decision by mid-March on that one, because they're not going to just pay him $15 million and have it count against the cap this year. So I'm expecting if he wants to play, they'll do an extension for a couple years. You could slap on, it doesn't really matter what the salary numbers are if you don't expect him to play, because it's fake money essentially. So, we'll say we'll give him Tom Brady's deal, right? $25 million a year for 2 years. That's about the going rate for, aging quarterbacks at this point in time.
Right.
So you slap that on the back end of his current deal. You turn his $19 million total salary between roster bonus and base salary this year into a signing bonus. He plays for the base salary, which is a little over $1 million. So $18 million of that spread out over 3 years means that, $6 million counts this year, $12 million in future years. That means you save $12 million against the cap this year by signing him to a 2-year extension that basically costs you what you were going to pay him this year anyway. So like that right there, he's set to count $41 million against the cap. You can save 12 of that. I mean, the max you could save is 19 if he's cut or retired. For salary cap purposes, cutting and retiring is the same thing. So yeah, for Ben, that's probably the most likely scenario if he wants to play, is you sign him to an extension and stretch that number out. The other options are cutting him or he retires, or you just let him play on his current number, which the Steelers have said is infeasible and isn't going to happen. So yeah, that one's out the window. Or you just ask him to take a straight up pay cut, which they've done in the past. Sometimes it's worked. Sometimes, like James Harrison, it didn't work. And the player's like, nope, I'll just let you cut me. And then we realized that was a mistake and bring him back 2 years later. But nevertheless,
worked out with Ike and Bettis though.
It did, yes. Ike and Bettis did take straight pay cuts, so that is another option. I'll say the complicating factor for Ben Roethlisberger is that the bulk of his money this year, 15 of the 19 million, is due in a roster bonus, not in base salary. So if he's going to forego a significant amount of cash, he'd basically have to give up that roster bonus. Saving what Drew Brees did for the Saints, all his money was in base salary. So he said, yeah, I'll just, cut my base salary. But Ben's being in a roster bonus, that's a one-time check he gets in March, not a, per game allocation over the year. So, that's a big hunk of money he's potentially passing up.
Yeah. It's
24th.
Yeah, it's a little over a month away, and it's got to be settled by then, and that's why they are scheduled to meet.
A couple of
go
points
ahead, Ben.
I'd like to make after Ian just did all of that. The people I've talked to insist that the last contract that they gave to Heath Miller and to Troy Polamalu, those were not fake years. That they believed that those players would play. At least they may not play the last year of those contracts, but that that there was a good chance that they were going to perform and finish those contracts. They were surprised that Heath Miller retired when he did. He didn't tell anyone he was doing it. And Troy, basically, they just got to the point with Troy where they were like, okay, you're kind of a liability in coverage now. You're a box-only safety in a league that can't use box-only safety. And it's time to have you retire because we don't want to cut you, kind of a deal. So they basically talked him into it. As far as the point was made to me because I suggested the 2-year extension for Ben, and they said that would be groundbreaking for the Steelers. The Steelers don't typically extend players beyond what they think they can play,
right? And
they do not do voidable years. They never have. So just doing a 2-year extension for Ben when they only expect him, cat's out of the bag, kids. They only expect him to play this year if he plays at all.
Yeah.
Okay. So, basically doing a 2-year deal with years that they view as entirely fake is not something the Steelers do. They should do business that way. I'm not trying to argue that they're doing this right. Okay. they should do it this way. If it were me, I'd give him a 4-year extension and spread it out over 5 years so that I could take make room and take some bad cap medicine later. And, I do all kinds of different things, but that's just not the way they do business. They don't try and circumvent the cap like a lot of teams do. Okay. Drew Brees signed a 4-year extension his last year. He had 2 voidable years on his contract with no salary because they were voidable. And they were there entirely for the purposes of spreading out his signing bonus, nothing else. And, a lot of teams do business like that. The Steelers won't. So it complicates things. And it still brings me back to the fact that, yes, with those 3 players, with James Harrison, with Ike Taylor, and with Jerome Bettis, they asked them to take pay cuts to stay with the team. Usually they get to this point with a player, they just cut them.
Right.
But there are certain guys you just can't do that with. And my instinct still is that they are going to ask Ben to take a straight pay cut. How much that's going to be, I don't know. Maybe, and $19 million for a starting quarterback in the NFL is already low.
Already cheap.
Yeah, it's already low. And so I don't know how this is going to work out. I'm it's a lot for him to chew on, whatever they're going to ask him to do. And
well, and he claimed, he's on the record with Ed Bouchette essentially saying, I'll do whatever. Money doesn't matter. And that's, I'm not trying to paint him as money hungry or anything like that, but we've heard players say that in the past.
I mean, he's made $250 million.
Yeah,
I'm
with you.
He's going to be getting some pressure from the league.
Yes.
For taking that kind of a deal. And the point they're going to make to him is you're doing a disservice to your colleagues by doing this, because now they're going to be expected to do it too.
Right.
And that's going to be the pressure he's going to be facing. He's not facing any financial pressure. This is not a financial hardship for Ben. If he never makes another $1, he's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And did he ever end up moving? I know his house was for sale at one time. They were trying to move into a different part of
I'm not sure, but the house they showed on that YouTube show he did was absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, yeah. I believe that was the one with the big 7 in the pool.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted that pool. What a novelty. Okay, so let's move on. Joe Hayden here. Also, will have a year left on his contract.
Do we want to talk about both Hayden and Nelson, because they both have a year left?
Yeah, so absolutely.
They go hand in hand.
Yeah. And now, granted, the ages are a little different. Nelson's about 4 years younger than Hayden is, but Ian, go ahead and lay it out then with how you would work with Hayden and Nelson here.
I mean, if it was up to me, I would see if Nelson would take an extension for a couple years, and I would see if Hayden would take a straight pay cut. I mean, like we said, we're going into this year $21 million over. So the numbers we're looking at for these guys are not sustainable at all.
Right.
They signed Nelson had I'll say a spotty at best career in Kansas City. We signed him to a 3-year deal, and he worked out great. Kevin Colbert takes some crap for some bad free agent signings, as he should, but Steven Nelson worked out great.
Turned out very well.
Yep. And he's only going to be 28 next year. Typically, and I've done some research on this, typically cornerbacks hit their falling off point a little after 30, 31, 32 is when they just can't keep up anymore. So, Nelson's only going to be 28. You could sign him to a 3-year extension, for ages 28, 20, or 2-year extension, basically tack on 2 to his current one, but, basically get him through his age 30 or age 31 season, still capture some of those prime years of his career and spread this cap hit out a little bit.
Okay, so that's Nelson, and then you said Hayden the straight cut.
Hayden, he's going to be 33, and he's been a really good player for us. He's been in the league for a long time. But I mean, there were times last year when he just couldn't keep up either. So it's getting to the point, or actually, sorry, he's going to be 32 this year. So this will be his age 32 season. And like I said, that's kind of when